We're led by a man who doesn't have a goal, a vision, which is why he gets blown around by events. His 12th U-turn is going to be on the pubs. Mind you, I quite like his U-turns.
Right, so picture this. You're the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You stride up to the podium, chest puffed out, ready to announce your brilliant master plan to save Britain from illegal immigration. You declare with all the confidence of a man who's never been wrong in his life, you will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. Cue the dramatic pause, cue the headlines, cue the absolute chaos. And then, just a few weeks later, you're backtracking faster than a cyclist who's just spotted a lorry coming the wrong way down a one-way street. Welcome to the Keir Starmer School of Policymaking, where U-turns aren't just accepted, they're practically part of the curriculum. I'm Brit Article, and today we're diving into what might genuinely be one of Starmer's most spectacular climb-downs yet, the great digital ID debacle that's got Nigel Farage absolutely buzzing with righteous indignation. And honestly, he's not entirely wrong this time. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride through government incompetence, public backlash, and the beautiful sound of nearly 3 million people collectively shouting, "Absolutely not, mate." And hey, if you want more brutally honest takes on British politics, delivered with the kind of energy that'll make your morning coffee feel unnecessary, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next in Westminster's never-ending circus. So, let's rewind to September, when Sir Keir Starmer, fresh off his election victory and clearly feeling himself, decided to announce this revolutionary idea, mandatory digital ID for everyone who wants to work in Britain by 2029. Now, on paper, this sounds almost reasonable, doesn't it? Stop illegal immigration, crack down on illegal working, make health records more efficient. It's like the government's version of a miracle cure that also makes you taller and better looking. The problem is, much like those miracle cures, when you actually examine what's in the bottle, you realize you're basically buying expensive water with a fancy label. But Starmer wasn't having any of that negativity. Oh no, he was fully committed to this plan. "Let me spell it out," he said, probably while someone in the background frantically tried to get his attention to suggest maybe, just maybe, they should think this through a bit more. "You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID." Bold, definitive, absolutely dripping with the kind of confidence that usually precedes a spectacular fall from grace. Now, here's where it gets properly interesting, because the British public had what can only be described a journey with this policy. Initially, when people heard it'll stop illegal working, about 70% were on board. I mean, fair enough, right? We've all seen the headlines about exploitation, about people working in awful conditions, about businesses undercutting legitimate employers by hiring illegally. So yeah, the pitch worked, for about 5 minutes. But then, and this is the beautiful thing about democracy when it actually functions, people started thinking. Dangerous, I know. They started asking questions like, hang on, who's going to have access to all this data? And what happens when, not if, when this inevitably gets hacked? And isn't this basically turning Britain into some sort of surveillance state where Big Brother knows every single thing about us? Suddenly, that 70-30 split in favour flipped completely the other way. 70% against, 30% still clinging to the original argument. That's not just a shift in public opinion, that's a full-on earthquake. And who was absolutely loving every second of this government-inflicted chaos? Oh, you know exactly who. Step forward Nigel Farage, the political equivalent of that mate who's always got "I told you so" locked and loaded for any occasion. Speaking on GB News, because of course he was, Farage absolutely laid into Starmer with the kind of glee that only comes from watching your political opponents repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot. The announcement of compulsory digital ID was, I thought, one of Starmer's worst moments yet, he said, and you can practically hear the satisfaction dripping from every word. Now, I'll be honest, Farage says a lot of things are the worst moment yet for whoever's in power, but this time he might actually have a point. Farage went on to break down exactly why this policy was such a disaster, and credit where it's due, his analysis was pretty spot on. They told us it would stop illegal immigration, they told us it would stop illegal working, they told us it would make our health records even better and more efficient. Classic government oversell, isn't it? It's like when they tell you the new IT system will revolutionize everything, and then 3 years later you're still using Excel spreadsheets from 2007 because the new system crashes every 17 minutes. But then Farage hit on the real concerns that were making people nervous. The counter-arguments were that it's Big Brother gone mad. The counter-arguments were that all this data would just leak anyway, as nearly all of it does. And let's be brutally honest here, he's not exactly wrong about the data leaks, is he? We've had more government data breaches in recent years than we've had competent transport secretaries, and that's saying something. But here's what really got Farage fired up, and what should worry anyone who cares about effective governance regardless of where you sit politically. This government is astonishing, he said. It announces initiative after initiative and gets forced to change its mind. Now that's not just a sick burn, that's a genuine critique of how this government operates. Think about it. How many times have we seen this exact pattern? Big announcement, media blitz, public backlash, quiet climb down. It's like watching someone repeatedly touch a hot stove and act surprised every single time that it burns. At what point does the learning happen? At what point does someone in number 10 say, maybe, just maybe, we should actually gauge public opinion and think through the consequences before we announce these things with the confidence of someone who's definitely done their homework?
And speaking of public opinion, let's talk about that petition, shall we? Nearly 3 million people. 3 million! That's not just a few disgruntled folks on Twitter having a moan. That's a massive chunk of the British public saying, absolutely not, we're not having this. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the population of Wales going, cheers for the offer, Keir, but we'll pass. That's the kind of number that should make any government sit up and take serious notice. It's the kind of number that says, we've fundamentally misjudged the public mood here, and we need to do some serious damage control before this becomes a full-blown political crisis. And what did the government do? They watered down the policy faster than a bartender who's trying to stretch their vodka supply through a busy Friday night. Now, let's be clear about what's happened here, because the government's trying very hard to spin this as something other than a complete U-turn. A government spokesman said, and I'm quoting here, "We are committed to mandatory digital right-to-work checks." Right, so still mandatory, got it. But then they continue, "We have always been clear that details on the digital ID scheme will be set out following a full public consultation which will launch shortly." Hang on a second, always been clear? Always? Because I seem to remember Sir Keir being pretty crystal clear that this was happening, consultation or not. This is like saying, we're definitely going to jump off this cliff, but don't worry, we'll have a meeting about whether to bring parachutes. The spokesman went on, "Digital ID will make everyday life easier for people, ensuring public services are more personal, joined up and effective, while also remaining inclusive." Inclusive, that's the word they've gone with, because nothing says inclusive quite like forcing everyone to have a digital ID or lose the ability to work, does it? But here's the thing that really gets me about this whole sorry saga. This isn't actually about whether digital ID is a good idea or a terrible one. Reasonable people can disagree about that. Some countries have implemented similar systems without turning into dystopian nightmares. Others have had serious issues with privacy and data security. The debate itself is legitimate. What's not legitimate is the way this government handled it from start to finish. They announced it with maximum confidence and minimum consultation. They made bold, definitive statements about how it would solve multiple problems simultaneously, like some sort of policy Swiss Army knife. And then, when faced with public opposition, they've scrambled to make it sound like they were always planning to consult, always planning to make it voluntary instead of mandatory, which rather defeats the entire point of stopping illegal working, doesn't it? I mean, if it's voluntary, presumably people working illegally just won't volunteer. That's not exactly rocket science. We've got nearly 3 million people who've made their voices heard through a petition, which is actually democracy working as intended, even if it does make the government look rather silly. And we've got Nigel Farage, absolutely loving life, pointing out that this is yet another example of a government that announces first and thinks later. The sad thing is he's got ammunition here, and it's ammunition that Labour has basically handed to him gift-wrapped with a bow on top. Look, I'm not saying digital ID is definitively good or bad. What I am saying is that if you're going to propose something this significant, something that affects every single person who wants to work in this country, you probably should have your ducks in a row before you announce it to the world. You probably should consult widely. You probably should game out what the opposition will be. You probably should have answers ready for obvious questions about data security, privacy, and civil liberties. You know, basic stuff. Instead, what we got was a bold announcement, followed by weeks of public backlash, followed by a hasty retreat while trying to pretend it was all part of the plan. It's not a good look, and more importantly, it's not effective governance. The British public aren't stupid. We can tell when someone's winging it, and right now, on issue after issue, this government looks like it's winging it. And that's where we are, folks. Another week, another U-turn, another opportunity for the opposition to absolutely pile in and claim the government has no idea what it's doing. Will Labour learn from this? Will they start properly consulting before making grand announcements? Will they develop an actual strategy for communicating policy changes? Or will we be back here in a few weeks talking about the next great climb down? I know where I'd put my money. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.